Section 29 of the American Egypt. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. The American Egypt by Channing Arnold and Frederick J. Tabor Frost. Section 29. Slavery on the Haciendas, Part 2. If the hardship of the Indian's lot was merely slavery, it might be argued that there were slender grounds for our indictment. Slavery may under certain circumstances be far from an evil, where the backward condition of a race is such as to justify its temporary existence, and where the slave owner can be trusted. But the slave owner can very seldom be trusted, and he certainly cannot be in Yucatan. It is no exaggeration to say that the enslavement of the Indians of Yucatan never has had, never can have, justification. Conceived in an unholy alliance between the Church and brute force, it has grown with the centuries into a race degradation which has as its only objects the increasing of the millions of the slave owners and the gratification of their foul lusts. The social condition of Yucatan today represents as infamous a conspiracy to exploit and prostitute a whole race as the history of the world affords. Yucatan is governed by a group of millionaire monopolists whose interests are identical, banded together to deny all justice to the Indians, who, if need be, are treated in a way an Englishman would blush to treat his dog. The Indians hear only with their backs. Yes, but the ill treatment of the poor wretches often does not end with a whipping, it ends in murder. We will give particulars of some cases. Some years ago an Indian was thrashed to death on the estate of the brother of a high official in Yucatan. The body was easily disposed of, buried at night like a dog's. But some of his fellow workmen talked, it seems, and news of the crime found its way to the capital. There a young lawyer, Perez Escofé, indignant at the report, took a solicitor down to the hacienda and got from some of the Indians affidavits as to their knowledge of the murder. Armed with this he published the facts in the Merida newspaper, demanding an investigation. The haciendado concerned sent his solicitor down and obtained from the very Indians sworn contrary statements. On this Perez, his adviser, and the editor who had had the courage to publish Escofé's first appeal, were arrested and thrown into prison. That is 3 years and more ago, and Escofé and his lawyer were still in Merida prison without trial at the time of our visit, if our information be correct. The haciendado's family dares not allow and has so far proved powerful enough to prevent a trial. The third man was liberated owing to very influential friends who threatened exposure if he were not released. Another loathsome case was that of the beating to death of an Indian girl of 11 by her old Yucatecan mistress. The poor child had been guilty of some trifling disobedience, and the murderess, having plenty of money, had no difficulty in getting an order for burial, the death being announced as due to pneumonia. The truth would never have come out but for the prattling of the granddaughter of this human beast who, childlike, told some neighbours. Yucatecan mistresses beat their Indian servants mercilessly for slight faults, but it will scarcely seem credible to English readers that Yucatecans are so lost to all sense of manliness that they too are often guilty of the basest cruelty towards the women servants. We heard of one case where a Yucatecan, because the Indian girl was a little late in bringing him his early breakfast of milk and bread, threw in her face the jug of boiling milk, and beat her over the head with a long stick of crusty roll till she was unconscious. For such cowardly curs there is no punishment. In this case the poor girl confessed to a friend that for days she had murder in her heart, and this feeling of revenge worried her so that at last she went to the priest for advice. That worthy told her she must be docile, that she must submit herself in all things to her master. This is really the worst feature of the conspiracy to degrade the Indians, the part the Church plays. The priests back up the haciendados in everything because it is from them they get their money. Another outrageous case was that in which a very rich Yucatecan was concerned. Because his Indian driver did not go quick enough to please him, he thrashed him into unconsciousness in the street, and afterwards had him put in prison on some trumped-up charge for 6 months. This case, however, was so public, many passers witnessing the grossness of the assault, that the family found it necessary to come to terms with the injured man. It would not be at all true to say that the Indians are often beaten to death. Labor is far too scarce in Yucatan. A perfect network of regulations and laws are in force on all the haciendas to keep the Indians. The unfortunate wretches are absolutely essential to the fortune-getting of the Yucatecans, and are far too precious to be recklessly killed off. The haciendas are regarded as excellent breeding grounds for new generations of slaves. Thus a rule is that no Indian of either sex shall marry off the hacienda. The real truth is that the Indians are nothing but cattle, and just as much the property of their master as the heifers in a farmyard in England belong to the farmer. To a friend of ours an Indian came, saying he owed his master $100, and begging that his debt might be paid and that he might come to work for him. Well, our friend agreed to pay his debt. Then round comes the master to say that the man really owed him $340, which of course was a lie, to be supported, if need be, by forged entries in the hacienda books. He further says he will not accept payment, as he wishes to get the man back and whip him publicly to make an example of him. The man said he would rather die than go back, and it ended by the master, fearful lest the slave should kill himself, selling him for his debt to another haciendado, who in turn would get all the work he could out of the poor devil. Thus, though there is no open slave market in Merida, these cowardly slave owners traffic in their slaves at their own free will, and there is literally no escape for the Indians. There are 3 reasons for the continuance of this cruel system. First, the prostitution of the Church to the haciendados. Superstitious to a degree remarkable even among the many semi-civilized peoples who have been victimized by Catholicism, the Mayans look to their priests as semi-divinities whose word is law, and a debauched priesthood eager to make friends with the mammon of unrighteousness, and themselves unscrupulous in self-indulgence, greedily support slavery. Secondly, the lack of loyalty among the Indians to each other. This is the natural effect of the centuries of oppression which they have endured. All the manliness of the race, all the spirit and nobility of a nature which wrung a tribute even from Spanish historians, have been effectually crushed out of them. This is indeed the saddest side of it all. The Yucatecan bullies have done their work so well that if the Indians of all the haciendas could be asked whether they were contented, a large majority, possibly almost all, would apathetically declare themselves content. They are like prisoners who have been so long in the gloom of a dungeon that they would be actually terrified of the sunshine. And thirdly, the water supply is an enormous auxiliary in the maintaining of the present disgraceful state of affairs. As we have said, there are no rivers in Yucatan, and the only water available is that obtained from the cenotes or wells attached to the haciendas. Practically you may say that the whole water supply of the country is in the hands of the landlords. To leave one farm would only mean going to another for the miserable serf. Each haciendado helps every other in keeping the slaves on the places. Thus, turn where he may, the Indian has no refuge but the woods, from which he would be hunted with dogs, just as Mrs. Beecher Stowe has told us was always done in the South. He submits to his fate, but hard as we have shown that to be, there is worse to be told. A slave, with a wage which is a mockery, a pittance given really to make more plausible the case of his master, he must see his daughters submit to a systematic tyranny of lust which is really so base that it is difficult to write of it in calm language. Here in Yucatan every sexual horror which in the story of the South in the 60's horrified the world is reproduced, cloaked by the foulest hypocrisy. The Indian, from her childhood up, is the prey of the haciendado and his sons. From their foul clutches she cannot escape. If her father had, poor devil, any scruples left, he must stifle them or be prepared to risk his life by objecting. As a matter of fact, so immoral and degraded have almost all the hacienda Indians become that objections to this droit de seigneur, this jus primi noctis, are almost unheard of. We are not writing without weighing our words carefully when we say that there are farms in plenty where the slave owner demands as part of his serf's obligations the right to every lass as soon as she enters on womanhood, sometimes much before. He demands it, and he does what he will with these children, for they are usually little else, and there is no remedy for the parents. Inconceivable cynicism is the attitude of all Yucatecans towards sexual excesses. The young sons of 14 and upwards are not restrained from, indeed they are often actually encouraged by fathers and even mothers in indulging their boyish passions at the expense of the little Indian slave girls. It is no answer to say, as some Yucatecans do, that the girls are in very many cases more than willing victims of their boy lovers. Yucatecan lads are notably handsome, and even maids of the cold north would find it hard to withstand their wooing. It remains the fact that these youthful Don Juans in many cases do not woo at all. They command, and the girl child must go at night to the boy's room or be cruelly beaten by him till she surrenders. If she plucked up courage to complain to her mistress, she would be simply laughed at. She is but a little slave girl. What better fate could she ask for herself than to have thus early attracted the notice of the lad who will some day be her owner? And if a child results, why it is but one more hacienda baby brought up with the rest. No one cares. And if it be a girl, why then in the fullness of years it will most probably attract the notice of its own father, who by that time will have inherited the estates. The girl would not know, and dare not disobey if she did. And it is quite certain the man by that time would have ruined so many Indian girls that he would be past any sensitiveness where his self-gratifications were concerned. It is possible that the reader will by this time be willing to acquit us of any unfairness of which we may have seemed guilty in Chapter 4, when we divided the population of so-called civilized Yucatan into savages and slaves. As a rule it may be said that the Yucatecan is a benevolent master. It pays him better to be so, and every Yucatecan's one rule in life is to do what pays him. Indeed, there is really no reason for him to be harsh. The average Indian is as submissive as a well-whipped hound, creeping up after a thrashing to kiss his master's hand. This Stephens actually witnessed, and the miserable slaves are always made to do it. He seldom disobeys. He works uncomplainingly all his life for no pay, and he breeds pretty daughters for his lord's gratification. The Yucatecan would indeed be hard to please if he quarrelled with such an exemplary beast of burden. And the habit of submission learnt through centuries of tyranny has affected the Mayan women. They exhibit a complacency towards their Yucatecan lovers which suggests, what alas cannot be denied, that chastity means little to them to day. Visiting a large place, a little incident struck us as very significant. The haciendado was showing us his kitchens. Many Indian women were busied at trays and tables, preparing meal and so forth. One beautiful girl, about 18 perhaps, was bending over her task, and as our host passed her he grasped her plump brown neck, squeezing it as one would pet a dog. If we lived a century we should not forget the way that girl looked up at him. It was a mixture of animal submission and feminine coquetry which there was no mistaking. There was in the girl's eyes something which told volumes, and they were not very pleasant reading for any men who have learnt that the love of women is a prize which should be earned. In truth, Mayan morality is very, very lax, and the blame lies on the Christians who came 4 centuries back to Yucatan to civilize and preach the love of God to the Indians. They cannot wriggle out of that blame, they cannot shirk it, even if doubt could be entertained as to the ancient Mayan laws we have quoted in Chapter 14, showing the sanctity attached by them to chastity. There can be no ground for disbelieving the Spanish historians. They bear united testimony to the evils which resulted from the conquest. They state that the Mayan women dearly prized their chastity, but that all high ideals were lost on the arrival of the Spaniards. Yes, the Christians have changed all that. Who will be the thrower of the first stone at the humble Indian lassie who prefers the kisses of a lover to the whip and starvation? It is all very sad, but so natural. They have learnt their lesson. Their masters, their priests even, have taught them not to value chastity. What avails it for them to struggle, even if they had the wit to do so? From our balcony at Tizimin we watched one morning played that comedy of life which so often turns to tragedy. An Indian girl, a beautiful young creature of about 12, her soft white huipil clinging round the dainty brown calves, her basket of fruit balanced on her small black head, pattered down the dusty road. There met her a Yucatecan, young, tall, with big black moustache and fine eyes, just the face to win her simple heart. A look, a glance, a giggle. They stopped to speak. By the pretty toss of her head you knew he was pressing her to see him and she was refusing. But she would, of course. Her heart, simple as a bird's, would be aflutter till she had given her handsome lover all, till she had run eager to meet life and its secrets halfway. For him it was the merest incident. A month or two and she would be forgotten. What did it matter? She's only an Indian. Perhaps he is right. Perhaps it does not really matter. Perhaps as she clasps closer to her brown breast the baby clinging with greedy lips to her nipple, she too will think it does not matter. Perhaps she will not think at all. She is a mother. It matters little by whom. She has done her duty to God, who willed her maker of men. She has done her duty to her master, who bids her make him slaves. Perhaps in the black head, bending, crooning, over the morsel of brown flesh there will be no feeling, more or less, than the apathetic mother love of the cow as it licks with loving tongue each spot on its new born calf. Perhaps, perhaps not. He would be bold indeed who would dare to say that man has a right to command that apathy. And so, after centuries of oppression, the race is dead, a chattel, body and soul, of a corrupt and degraded people. When the task of revivifying these poor Mayans with the elixir of freedom is undertaken, if it ever is, and pray God it be, by the United States of America, it will be as difficult as nursing back to convalescence a patient sick unto death. No beings will at first understand freedom so ill. They are like prisoners who have been for weary years in the darkness of unlighted dungeons. The glare of the sunlight of freedom will be too dazzling for their poor atrophied eyes. They will shade them and cringe back into the gloom. Well, we left our Indians returning from their day's work as the sun is sinking. There is little more for them to do. The cattle to tend, their humble meal to eat. And then from the little stucco chapel rings out the bell for vespers. The blue of the heavens has changed to a steel, fading on the western horizon into the palest lemon. Over the baked earth steals the cool breath of night. The silence is broken only by the hum of some night moth, the cry of an owl in the distant woods, the lowing of the cattle in the corral. It is very wonderful, this first half hour of the tropic night. In the stillness, sitting on the broad stone veranda, we presently, all silently, stand when the vesper bell's monotonous tinkle stops and, like a funeral toll, 9 solemn notes sound for the 9 mysteries. As the echo of the 9th dies away, the hacienda day is done. In the darkness the white-clothed, brown-legged figures glide up, hat in hand, and greet the haciendado and his guests with "Buenas noches" (Good night). Ah, dear gentle brown-skinned folk, your night has indeed come, but it is scarcely good. Your heritage is another's. You are his, bodies and souls. Your strength and muscle are given you to enrich him. Your backs are his to will. Your sons and daughters are his. All that you have is his to give or to take away. Truly has the night come. Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. You are meek, but you are disinherited. Verily, there is nothing sacred to man. not even the Beatitudes. End of Section 29. Recording by Shena Ser, Fresno, California.